So there's this moment, and I think a lot of people in their 20s know exactly what I'm talking about, where you're scrolling through your phone, maybe late at night, and you end up on someone's Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and this person is just living. Nice apartment, nice car, traveling somewhere that looks expensive, and you do the mental math and go, wait, they're like 26. How? And then you either spiral into comparison mode, or you close the app and go back to watching something mindless, and that question just kind of lingers. And the annoying thing is, sometimes the answer is just, they came from money, and there's nothing particularly instructive about it. But sometimes, more often than you'd think, the answer is actually something much more interesting. It's not that they earned more, it's that they made a handful of really specific choices in their 20s that quietly compounded over time into something significant. That question, why do some people in their 20s make choices that set them up for real wealth, while others spend the same decade spending money on things that feel good now but leave them with nothing later? That's basically what I think about constantly. My name is Sam, and I'll be honest, I've spent an almost unreasonable amount of time obsessing over the financial decisions people make in their 20s, why some of those decisions age incredibly well and others age terribly, and what separates the people who hit 30 or 35 with actual financial momentum from those who feel like they're starting from zero. And what I've found, honestly, is kind of surprising. Because when most people think about smart financial choices in your 20s, they immediately think about what not to buy. Don't buy the expensive coffee. Don't buy the new car. Don't spend money on experiences. Just save everything. Grind. Sacrifice. And look, some of that is true, but it's also deeply incomplete. Because there are things you can buy in your 20s, actual purchases, actual investments of time and money, that don't just feel good now, but actively build the foundation for everything that comes later. And if you don't know what those things are, you might accidentally spend the most financially formative decade of your life buying all the wrong things. That's what today is about. Not a lecture on what to avoid, but a genuine conversation about what to actually invest in, and why the earlier you do it, the more it pays off. Let's get into it. The first thing, invest in your own financial education. Okay, so I want to start here because I think it's the one that gets the least credit, and it's honestly the one that changes everything else on this list. Here's the thing about financial education. Real financial education. Not a one-week unit in high school where someone explained how a checking account works. It's not glamorous. It doesn't feel like a purchase in the traditional sense. But the money you spend on books, courses, podcasts, or even just good content about money and investing in your 20s is, dollar for dollar, probably the highest returning investment you'll ever make. And I know that sounds hyperbolic, but think about it this way. If you're 23 years old and you spend $50 on a handful of books about personal finance, something like The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, or I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, or even just a solid beginner's guide to investing, and those books help you understand compound interest well enough that you start investing 5 years earlier than you otherwise would have, that $50 investment just generated potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional wealth by the time you retire. I remember reading my first serious personal finance book at around 24, and there was this moment, somewhere in the middle of it, where I literally put the book down and just sat there. Because I realized that I had been making financial decisions for about 6 years as an adult without actually understanding how any of it worked. No one had explained the difference between an asset and a liability. No one had shown me what compound interest would do to money I invested at 23 versus money I invested at 33. I was just kind of winging it, like most people do. The actionable piece here is simple. Budget a small amount each month, even $10 or $20, specifically for financial education. Books, reputable courses, maybe a subscription to a financial publication. Treat it like a utility, it's not optional. And if you want somewhere to start, The Psychology of Money is genuinely one of the best things you can read, because it's not just about tactics. It's about understanding why you make the financial decisions you do, which is honestly half the battle. The second thing, buy time back with systems and tools. This one's a little abstract, so let me explain what I mean. Your 20s are, in a very real sense, The time when you're building habits. And the habits you build around money, how you track it, how you save it, how you invest it, tend to stick around for a long time. The problem is that most people rely entirely on willpower to maintain good financial habits. They tell themselves they'll manually transfer money to savings every month. They'll remember to invest. They'll keep track of spending in their head. And willpower is, honestly, not a great financial strategy. Because life gets busy and willpower runs out. And suddenly, 3 months have passed and you haven't saved anything. This is where buying the right tools, and I mean genuinely paying for them if they're worth it, makes a real difference. A good budgeting app, an automated savings tool, even a session with a fee-only financial advisor to help you set up your accounts correctly. These things cost money up front. But what they buy you is automaticity. They take the decision out of your hands. The richest financial decision I ever made in terms of peace of mind was setting up automatic transfers. Every payday, before I could even think about the money, a set amount moved automatically into savings and a set amount went into investments. I didn't have to be disciplined in the moment. The system was disciplined for me. There's actually a concept in behavioral economics called present bias, which is basically our tendency to value things we can have right now more than things we'd get in the future. It's why saving for retirement feels so abstract and difficult when you're 25. The future version of you feels almost like a stranger. Automation bypasses present bias entirely. You never see the money, so you never feel tempted to spend it. The practical takeaway? Spend money on the tools and systems that make good financial behavior automatic. If a budgeting app costs $5 a month and it saves you from 3 impulse purchases a week, it's one of the best investments in your life. Set up automatic transfers to savings and investments. Remove the friction from the right behaviors and add friction to the wrong ones. The third thing, buy index funds. Seriously, just start. I know this one sounds basic, but hear me out because I think there's a version of this that most people in their 20s still aren't doing, and the cost of not doing it is genuinely staggering. If you are in your 20s and you are not regularly putting money into a low-cost index fund, you are leaving an almost unfair amount of money on the table. And I say unfair because the mechanism at work here, compound interest, is completely indifferent to how hard you work or how smart you are. It rewards one thing: starting early. Here's a number I want you to sit with. If you invest just $200 a month starting at age 22, and you earn an average annual return of 7%, which is a conservative estimate for a diversified index fund over the long run, by the time you're 62, you'll have roughly $520,000. That's from $200 a month, from your 20s. Now imagine you wait until you're 32 to start that same habit. Same $200 a month, same 7% return. By 62, about $260,000, roughly half, because of a 10-year delay. That 10 years of waiting cost you over $250,000 for doing nothing differently except starting later. I'm not saying this to make anyone feel guilty. I'm saying it because I want the weight of that number to actually land. The cost of waiting isn't theoretical. It's real, it's calculable, and it's completely avoidable. The practical move here is to open a brokerage account or a retirement account like a Roth IRA if you're in the US, or the equivalent in your country, and set up a recurring investment into a broad market index fund, something that tracks the total stock market or the S&P 500. Keep fees low. Don't try to pick individual stocks. Don't try to time the market. Just invest consistently, every single month, regardless of what the market is doing. Set it up and then try very hard to forget it exists. The fourth thing, buy better health habits. Yes, this is a financial decision. Okay, slight pivot here, but stay with me because this one is more connected to wealth than most people realize. In your 20s, you have something that you will never have as much of again: the ability to establish health habits when the stakes are relatively low and the benefits are extremely long. And I don't mean this in a vague, motivational, take care of yourself way. I mean it in a very specific financial way. Healthcare is expensive. Chronic illness is expensive. Lost productivity from preventable health problems is expensive. And the habits you build in your 20s around sleep, exercise, diet, mental health, either compound positively over the next few decades or they don't. Just like financial compound interest, health either builds on itself or deteriorates over time. Now, spending money on health in your 20s might look like buying a decent pair of running shoes, or getting a gym membership you'll actually use, or paying for a few sessions with a therapist to deal with anxiety or stress before it calcifies into something harder to manage. It might mean spending a little more on food that actually nourishes you, rather than purely chasing the cheapest option every single time. None of this has to be expensive or performative, but thinking of it as an investment, rather than a luxury or an afterthought, changes how you prioritize it. There's also the energy dimension. And this one's a little harder to quantify, but it's real. People who are physically healthier have more energy. More energy means more productive hours. More productive hours means more capacity to work, to think, to create, to build. Over a decade, the compounding effect of being consistently more energetic and mentally sharp is not trivial. And honestly, I've noticed this in myself. When your health is bad, your financial decision-making suffers too. You're tired, you're stressed, you make impulsive purchases, you don't have the mental bandwidth to think long-term. Taking care of your body isn't separate from taking care of your finances. It's the same system. The fifth thing: buy skills that the market will pay for. Here's one that I think about a lot, and I think it gets lost in conversations about money that tend to focus entirely on saving and investing. Your income is the engine. Everything else, the saving, the investing, the budgeting, those are the steering wheel and the brakes. But if the engine is small, there's only so far you can go. And the most effective way to grow your income engine in your 20s is to invest deliberately in skills that the market values. And by buy, I mean spend money and time on developing specific monetizable skills. A course in data analysis, a coding bootcamp, a copywriting or sales course, a certification in a growing field, a workshop that makes you genuinely better at the thing you do for work. Not a random collection of loosely interesting classes, but a focused investment in becoming significantly more valuable to employers, clients, or customers. Here's the framing I find most useful. Every skill you acquire is a potential income stream, and income streams, like investments, compound. Someone who spends their 20s deliberately acquiring high-value skills tends to see their income grow faster than the average path of just showing up and waiting for annual raises. And every additional dollar of income, directed smartly, accelerates everything else on this list. I think about someone I knew who spent about $1,500 on a copywriting course when he was 24, which felt like a lot at the time, kind of terrifying actually, and within 18 months was doing freelance work that earned him more per hour than his full-time job. That one purchase changed his income trajectory for the next decade. That's not a unique story. It happens constantly, and the common thread is that someone decided to treat skill acquisition as a serious investment rather than an optional hobby. The practical advice here? Think about your current income and ask, what skill, if I developed it significantly over the next 12 months, would make me materially more valuable? And then spend money on that: a course, a coach, books, practice. Treat it like it's paying into a fund, because it is. It's paying into your own human capital, which is the most valuable asset you'll ever own. The sixth thing: buy quality once instead of cheap twice. This is the one that sounds counterintuitive when you're in your 20s and money feels tight, but it's something that truly financially savvy people understand in a deep way. There's this concept sometimes called the cost per use calculation. Basically, instead of looking at the sticker price of something, you think about how much you'll use it and divide accordingly. A $50 pair of shoes that falls apart in 3 months actually costs way more per use than a $150 pair that lasts 3 years. The cheap option felt financially responsible in the moment. The math says otherwise. Now, and this is important, this is absolutely not permission to justify expensive purchases across the board. I'm not saying go buy luxury everything because quality. That's how people rationalize all kinds of unnecessary spending. What I am saying is, for the things you use every single day, your mattress, your work shoes, your laptop, your main kitchen tools, your bed, spending more once to get something genuinely good is often cheaper than buying the budget version repeatedly. Your 20s is the time to start developing this kind of thinking. Not the impulse to always buy cheap, and not the impulse to always buy luxurious, but the habit of doing the actual calculation. How often will I use this? How long will it last? And what's the real cost over time? There's also an invisible cost to cheap things that people don't talk about enough. The friction and annoyance of stuff that doesn't work properly. A slow computer that crashes. Shoes that hurt your feet. A mattress that leaves you tired every morning. These things drain energy and mental bandwidth in small ways every single day. And over months and years, that drain adds up. Buying quality in the things that matter is also, in a very real sense, buying back peace of mind. The seventh thing. Buy experiences that expand your perspective strategically. Okay, so this is the one where I want to push back slightly against the narrative that your 20s should be purely about financial sacrifice. Because here's something I believe genuinely. Some of the best returns I've seen from money spent in your 20s come from experiences that expanded the person's perspective in ways that directly or indirectly led to better financial outcomes later. Travel that exposed someone to a different way of living and sparked a business idea. A conference where they met a mentor who changed their career trajectory. A sabbatical that gave them clarity about what they actually wanted to build their life around. Now, and I want to be careful here, I'm not talking about going into debt to travel or spending money on experiences to perform them for social media. That's not investment. That's just expensive. I'm talking about being strategic about which experiences you invest in and why. The question to ask before spending money on an experience in your 20s is this likely to expand my perspective, grow my network, deepen my skills, or genuinely enrich my life in a lasting way? A weekend trip to somewhere new to clear your head and come back energized? Probably worth it. A flight to attend an industry conference where you might meet people who change your career? Almost certainly worth it. A week in a new country that challenges your assumptions about how life can be structured? Arguably worth every penny. The version to be careful of is experience spending that's really just lifestyle inflation disguised as self-investment. There's a difference between traveling because it genuinely teaches you something and expands what you believe is possible, and traveling because it makes your life look interesting online. One compounds positively, the other is just expensive. The practical idea here is to allocate a specific experience fund, a set amount each month that goes toward experiences you've deliberately chosen for their growth value. Small enough to be sustainable, intentional enough to mean something. The bonus thing, the one nobody talks about. Buy time with the right people. I know this is technically the 8th thing, and I said 7, but I feel like leaving this one out would be doing you a disservice. Your 20s are the period of life when your network, the people you spend time with, learn from, and build relationships with, is the most malleable. You're moving through new environments, new jobs, new cities sometimes. You're meeting people constantly. And the relationships you invest in during this decade have an outsized effect on your financial life later, in ways that are hard to see until years afterward. This isn't about networking in the gross, transactional sense, where you go to events and hand out business cards and silently calculate what everyone can do for you. I mean genuinely investing in relationships with people who are where you want to be, who think about money and work and life in ways that challenge you, who make you feel like the person you're trying to become is actually achievable. There's that Jim Rohn quote, you've probably heard it, about being the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And look, it's a simplification, but the underlying point is real. If the people around you in your 20s are all operating from a scarcity mindset, treating financial ambition as either impossible or shameful, spending without thinking, and never talking about building or growing anything, you will absorb those norms. Quietly, almost invisibly, because that's how culture works. Spending money to be in rooms with people who are already where you want to go, a mastermind group, a professional association, a community around something you're building, is genuinely one of the highest leverage purchases you can make in your 20s. Not because those people will hand you money, but because being around them recalibrates what you believe is normal and possible. And belief, it turns out, is the bedrock of every financial decision you'll ever make. What all of this actually adds up to. So here we are. 8 things, yes, I know I said 7, sue me, that you can actually spend money on in your 20s that build the foundation for wealth later. Financial education. Systems and tools that automate good behavior. Index funds, started as early as humanly possible. Health habits that compound over decades. Skills that the market will pay for. Quality over quantity in the things that matter. Strategic experiences that expand your perspective. And the people around you. And I want to zoom out for a second, because looking at this list together, I think there's something important underneath all of it that's worth naming. Every single item on this list is an investment in something that grows over time. Not just financially, but in every dimension of your life. Your knowledge compounds. Your health compounds. Your skills compound. Your network compounds. Your investments compound. And the version of you that shows up at 35 or 40, the life you have, the options available to you, the financial cushion under your feet, is the direct result of what you repeatedly chose to invest in during your 20s. That can feel either exciting or terrifying depending on where you are right now. And I think both reactions are valid. Because the 20s are genuinely this strange decade where everything feels urgent and temporary at the same time. Like nothing you do matters that much, and also like everything you do is secretly defining the rest of your life. Both things are true. Sort of. But here's the thing I really want to leave you with, because I think it's the most honest thing I can say about all of this. You don't have to get it perfectly right. That's not the goal, and honestly, it's not even possible. You're going to make purchases in your 20s that you'll look back on and cringe. I certainly did. You're going to miss some compounding years because you didn't know better yet. You're going to spend money on things that didn't earn it. That's not failure, that's just the process. What matters is that you start thinking about money as something you can actively understand and direct, not something that just happens to you. The people who end up wealthy aren't necessarily the ones who never made financial mistakes. They're the ones who developed enough financial literacy, early enough, to make more good decisions than bad ones over a long enough period of time. And you're watching this video, which means you're already paying attention, which means you're already ahead of where most people are. Start with one thing on this list. Just one. Open the brokerage account. Buy the book. Set up the automatic transfer. Make one real, intentional financial decision today that your future self will quietly thank you for. That's how it starts. Not with a perfect plan, just with a single, better choice made today. I'll see you in the next one.